The sexual addiction cycle describes that a sex addict goes from some place in their mind where they're having feelings of shame and their core beliefs of being bad and worthless people. No one loves them, no one takes care of them. Sex is their most important need. So they go from the shame to the core beliefs to this painful emotional and spiritual feeling they're having to their fantasy life, which of course we've already talked about. Just for now, focus on the fact that in order to get to the fantasy, you've had to work through places in your mind and heart to get to a sexual fantasy as being the source of solution to your deepest pain. And it's easy to get to this place just by seeing a trigger meaning some stimulus out there that's sexual, at least to you, might not be sexual to somebody else, but to you, you take it in as a sexual stimulus. It evokes memories, fantasies, sexual feelings. Some of it may be normal biology to be looking at what you're looking at. And you get to this place of now not just being just sexually stimulated in the biological part of your brain, you're also now thinking in terms of a fantasy about what it might be like to be sexual right now with that person or in that way. You might be remembering things in your past. You might be projecting into the future. You're having a fantasy. And the reason we say preoccupied, it goes back to the point I was making about how much time this takes and how long you can spend on a given day thinking about these things. On the cycle, the next place you go is to something we call the ritual. The ritual is between, as you'll notice, the preoccupation and fantasy, the acting out at the bottom of the cycle. The ritual is technically anything you do between the first thought of doing this and the actual experience of acting out in that way. A crass way to look at this is that fantasy is thought, acting out is having an orgasm of some kind with yourself or others, and ritual is everything in between that. So there's a couple of important points for me to make. The first point is that ritual in and of itself could be addictive. It could be that part of your ritual is to engage in another addiction in order to get to your sexual acting out experience. The example that I used was you go to a bar. You want to pick up a person to be sexual with. So you drink in order to disinhibit yourself to do that. Well, that's how addictions interact, but the drinking then is technically a part of your sexual addiction ritual. Could be that you go to places where you eat in order to socially connect. You may drink coffee in order to get your dopamine level up so that you have more confidence or more energy. Those can all be parts of your ritual, and they could lead to other addictive activities. Again, addiction interaction. Rituals from various addictions can kind of overlap with each other, and some forms of acting out, at least in the sexual addiction cycle, like drinking or eating or whatever it is, could be part of the ritual that leads you to sexual acting out. Well, so that's one point to make about rituals. Another point is that they can be either short or long. Depending on the sexual activity you're trying to get to, the ritual could be a few minutes or it could be a few hours. In some cases it could be a few weeks, months, or even years. So let's take one of the sexual activities like looking at pornography. If you have in your mind a fantasy that I really just need to see today what's new on that website that I've been going to over and over again, do they have any new pictures on that website today? So you're thinking about it. Your ritual is simply to go to the computer, turn it on, click on the web domain. That may take a matter of 1 or 2 minutes. Now, that same kind of fantasy might involve waiting for the kids to go to bed, waiting for your spouse to go to bed. So you might have to wait a little bit. That's kind of what we might refer to as delayed gratification. But your ritual is to wait for people to leave you alone. That could be part of it. if masturbation was one of the activities that you were after, however you do that in whatever way, going from the thought about doing it, the stimulus that creates the feeling of needing to do that, to when you actually do that, it might simply mean walking into the bathroom, again, waiting for people to leave you alone, go to bed. It might be, in some of your fetish activities, assembling the various paraphernalia you use to enhance the excitement of that activity. That can be relatively short. Longer rituals sometimes happen around, acting out with prostitution or acting out with affairs or engaging in some of the more offensive behaviors. Let's take, for example, having an affair, and you basically connect with people, and you might even meet them at church. This is always the ones that makes me the saddest, as a Christian, to see, Christians acting out with each other, and their rituals have happened when they've met at church. It's the church coffee hour, and wife is off teaching a Sunday school class, husband's off singing in the choir, and we're standing in the coffee hour having a cup of coffee talking about the pastor's sermon that morning. Well, we're feeling like, boy, we're really kind of on fire for God. We're really true believing Christians. We're talking about the pastor's sermon, and that person smiles at you in a way that really kind of ministers to your soul at a deep level, and you say, my, you have the nicest smile. That's how an affair can start. It could be that simple. The next Sunday at coffee hour, you're kind of looking for that person. You engage in conversation again. This can go on Sunday after Sunday after Sunday until some crazy statement enters your mind and emanates from your lips. Gee, you understand me in so many more ways than my wife does. Or some other kind of dangerous statement like that. Before you know it, in weeks or months, you're going to be looking for ways to meet, and obviously maybe ramp into other kinds of connecting emotional, spiritual, and sexual activities. This could be a matter, again, of weeks, months, or years that you're cultivating that kind of experience if you're into an affair ritual. Another feature of rituals is that you have to somehow justify, and we talked about this back in that list of characteristics of sexual addiction, you're going to have to justify the sexual sin. So part of a ritual is thought process. What are you doing in your mind to justify, rationalize, minimize, bargain with God or with others that it's okay for you to do these activities? Maybe totally to yourself, maybe denial that you're putting out there to the rest of the world. It may be lies that you're telling to other people, maybe cover-ups or whatever it is. Rituals are thought processes, dialogues, conversations with yourself and others that allow you the freedom in your mind to go ahead and do some of this incredibly egregious sexual sin. So think of it that way. Rituals are about behaviors. Rituals are about thought process. They can be short and long. They're totally unique to every addict I've ever known, and they will, if engaged in, always lead to the bottom of the cycle, which is the sexual acting out behavior. In other words, part of that last piece of that point is if you engage in the ritual behaviors, it's kind of like an automatic response. Sooner or later, you're going to engage in the sexual activity that you're fantasizing about and pursuing. Remember also I said that when you think about the connecting, the conversations, the driving around, the dangerous areas, the pursuits of pornography or relationships or even prostitution experiences, when you think about all the activity, all the creativity, that in and of itself can be a form of addiction. And again, it's where your creativity is leading you into the pursuit, and the pursuit is a high in and of itself, and it eventually will lead you to the acting out high of the sexual experience. When you think about the amount of energy that's wasted in the ritual activity and you applied it to God's calling, plan, and purpose, there's some great things that could be happening. Well, for now, look at the rest of the cycle. You'll see that it goes from the acting out to that sense of despair, depression, despondency. I did it again. I'm a bad and worthless person. I've confirmed it one more time how out of control and unmanageable this is. And now I'm sitting here in my mood shift, my mood swing, my manic depressive part of this cycle. It's depressive. What do I do about that? I'm an addict, I'm impatient, I don't like this feeling, I better do something in order to get out of this, so I'll return back to the fantasy life, which already in and of itself creates neurochemistry that might take me out of it. Now, be careful here, because again, this is a point at which right here between despair and fantasy we begin to see addiction interaction, because at this point an addict who is primarily involved in sexual fantasy and activity might also say, you know, I'm feeling really bad, let me go eat something. I'm feeling really bad, let me go drink something. I'm feeling really bad, let me go have another smoke. Some of these cycles of addiction kind of start overlapping and looking like various hula hoops connected to one another, and the addict has the ability to transfer, to pop up one other thing, to medicate their feelings in a variety of ways. And some of those addictions, like work for these pastors, is a lot more admirable, because all the members of the church can say, what a wonderful pastor, he's working 18 hours a day, he's serving the body of Christ, you know, how are we so lucky to have this kind of guy? So we're enabling these guys to be, you know, ramped into work. Well, eventually, for a sex addict whose primary coping strategy, remember that diagnostic criteria, is sexual activity, they're going to get back to their sexual fantasies, because that's the way they find love, touch, and nurture. That's how these cycles work. These cycles like this can go on and spiral around for years. And as we know, they're getting worse all the time, leading you back and forth between the craziness and excitement of the acting out and the depression of the despair of being a bad and worthless person. As you think about this, and as I'm talking about it, it's incredibly tiring.